Well, 33,000 A's fans showed up to the Coliseum last night. It would have been nice if the A's showed up.
You are Locked On A's, your daily Oakland A's podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, A's fans, and welcome to Locked On A's, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about your Oakland A's, and this the final season in Oakland, all season long. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, more like Booking. Yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even Anaheim. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Follow us at Locked On A's on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Yeah, I mean, you know, I said the other day, at this point, this last week at the Coliseum is less about the results on the field and more about the fun and the camaraderie and the sadness and saying goodbye and everything like that. But for God's sakes, I mean, could you show up? I mean, at least the game on Friday, the way that Garrett Cole pitched and, it was extra innings and, there was at least excitement in this game. On Saturday, I mean, Carlos Rodon, I mean, he's a fine pitcher. He's not Garrett Cole. And from the beginning, in the first inning, Sears, who can sometimes be great, had the bases loaded, nobody out in the first. And then Giancarlo Stanton got a double play. And I started thinking, okay, all right, base loaded, nobody out. They get the double play, get out of this with only one run. Okay. Then Jason Dominguez, whose batting average was microscopic. You had Jason Dominguez and John Birdie coming up. And then, okay, they're going to get out of this inning. 0-2 pitch, Dominguez gets a base hit. Suddenly it's 2-0. Fine. Okay. Then the A's, they get Butler. Singles, stole a base. And I thought, okay. And then you had 2 on, 1 out, Bleday up. I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be a slugfest. It's going to be a slugfest. Because Carlos Rodon sometimes can look fantastic and sometimes look like a chump. So in that first inning, and I'm bringing this up for a reason. This first inning, I'm thinking, okay. This is going to be good. And then Bleday hits a double play. And when Volpe homered in the second, I really thought, oh no. And then, there was another challenge. And by the way, the A's got 2 calls turned over. All right. They got 2 calls turned their way. And then Giancarlo Stanton hit that home run in the third. And it was 6-0. 6-0 in the third. And if you thought the A's were going to win that game, I want a notarized piece of paper that had you saying that. I want time. I want it stamped. Because when it was 6-0, you just knew, okay, this is it. And then it just turned into a disaster. Mark Leiter Jr., who has been awful for the Yankees, winds up throwing 2 no-hit innings. Tim Meza, they didn't have to use any of their top relievers. And there were 3 things that happened that were positive for the A's, other than the attendance and everything like that. Shea Langoliers got on base 3 times. Lawrence Butler beat out an infield hit and stole his 17th base. And Hogan Harris threw 2 1/3 shutout innings to basically mean the bullpen is rested and ready for today. But there's an interesting statistic that you should keep in mind. The final score was 10-0. I've mentioned this a bunch of times on Locked On MLB, but when I get a chance to talk about it now, I'll bring it up now. The final score was 10-0. If there is a forfeit there has to be an official score entered into the record book. So if a team has to forfeit for whatever reason, the official score will be 9-0. They lost 9-0. That's the official score of a loss. Basically saying they giving them credit for 1 run for each inning, and the other team that has to forfeit gets 0. It adds -9 to your run differential if you have to forfeit a game. This happened in 1995 in a very tight pennant race between Colorado and Los Angeles for the National League West, and it was ball day at LA at Dodger Stadium, and the fans started throwing the balls on the field when a call went against Los Angeles, and Los Angeles had to the umps called it as a forfeit. By the way, in something that I do not want to see happen on Thursday, and I'll have something to do with it because I'll be at the Oakland Coliseum on Thursday, is the final game that the Washington Senators played in Washington in 1971 before they moved and became the Texas Rangers. There was basically a riot, and fans started throwing things on the field and tearing up the stadium and everything like that. And so the final game for the Washington Senators in 1971 was a 9-0 forfeit. The A's lost 10-0, which means in terms of their run differential, they were better off staying home. And the 30,000 fans who showed up would just get a show and everything like that and would have been declared a loss. That would have been better for their standings and their stats if they just stayed home, didn't show up. That's a bad sign. That is a very bad sign when not showing up is preferable to you know what I'm saying. It was a disaster. It was a disaster. And kind of sad. Like, you want to see them, this is the last bunch of games, and 33,000 people showed up. Think about all the really fun games and Rooker home runs and walk-off hits that were seen in front of 6,000, 5,000 people. Then you got 33,000 show up and you lay an egg. It was, and the one positive thing that happened in terms of standings and everything like that is the fact that the Angels lost to the Astros again, and with that, there is still a 5-game buffer between the Angels and the A's. But also with this loss, I mean, this loss was number 88, one for every key on the piano. They can only afford to lose one more game. They can only afford to lose one more game the rest of the way if they want to avoid 90 losses. And it's looking more and more like that's just not going to happen. And I hate to say it, but those 2 games they lost in Chicago are just looming. Absolutely looming. Actually, the horrific May and June that they had is what's looming. If they merely had a bad May and June, they would easily have 4 more wins. Let's just be light and say they had bad Mays and Junes. If they had 4 more wins, they'd be at 72 and 84. And then they would need just one more win to avoid 90 losses. It's a long shot now. Now, they could win today and sweep Texas and sweep Seattle. That's possible. We're not talking about Hatterberg hitting a home run and rounding the bases and later played by Chris Pratt. I'm just saying it's not probable. But at least some of the goals that we were hoping to have in this final year could come true. They're going to avoid 90 losses. And unless the Angels go on a massive run, they're going to not finish in last place. So let's see that glass half full there. We come back, I want to talk a little bit about the celebration that took place. And how good some of it felt and how weird, let's face it, how weird some of it really feels. Hey, let's talk to our friends over at Booking.com. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com, or more like Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even Anaheim. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. I use Booking.com, and I had a great trip this summer. And some of you may remember I went to Buffalo. I saw some dear friends in Buffalo, and I went to a Bison's game. And by the way, stayed in a fabulous downtown hotel in Buffalo. Buffalo's a beautiful city. It gets a bad rep. It is a beautiful city, and it's where I stayed was downtown, and kind of the theater district there was fantastic. Then off I went to Syracuse, stayed at a nice, safe hotel right nearby the campus, and went to see the Syracuse Mets. And then off to Cooperstown, where I went to the Baseball Hall of Fame and stayed in a hotel right by the lake, but walking distance to the Hall of Fame. Everything I booked was on Booking.com. Booking.com delivers exactly the right stay for you anywhere in the United States. Can help you book a stay that's even close to your rival team. No matter what team you're rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any city. From hotels that overlook stadiums to that fabulous place that I stayed in Cooperstown, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city. Booking.com. Get the app, or more like Booking.yeah. All right, let's hear from our friends over at FanDuel. Now, NFL fans, I know some of you are here. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. That site again is FanDuel.com. Thanks so much for making Locked On A's your first listen. For your second listen, listen to more of me, your pal Sully. I am the host of the Locked On MLB podcast and have been for the last 6 years. And I just cover everything, all the teams, all the pennant races, and it's winding down to a fabulous crunch in both the AL and NL wildcard. Check it out, Locked On MLB. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. All right, I'm trying to be positive about things. 33,000 A's fans there. Big crowd, good crowd. And the drone show was last night, the drone show of the history of the A's. And, it was a nice, I wasn't there. A lot of people took their phone, their phone videos of it. And yeah, it was beautiful. Drone shows are wild. And I really, anytime, I'll say it, anytime you could do a drone show instead of a fireworks show, I'm in. Drone shows are more creative. Drone shows are more interesting. And drone shows don't involve firing missiles into the sky and having them explode and putting God knows what into our atmosphere. And let's face it about fireworks shows. You've seen one, you've seen them all. Hey, ooh, ah. Yeah. I mean, maybe, I'm not saying get rid of fireworks shows. I am saying get rid of fireworks. If you buy fireworks and you blow them up in your driveway, stop it. Stop it. What are you, Wile E. Coyote, getting something from Acme? But drone shows are really beautiful. And when they're done right, they're spectacular. And they had all these great things turning into the different years. And you saw the Bash Brothers, and you saw Catfish Hunter, and you saw all these great A's figures sort of, forming in the air, like a scene from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, with all these UFOs floating around. And it was, it was really beautiful. And the fans seemed to love it. And it was a great show for the people who were there. A hell of a better show than the team put on. And then there was a video. And again, I wasn't at the game, but I saw the video because someone busted out their phone camera and shot it. And it was a video about the history of the Oakland A's and a tribute to the colorful fans who were there. And I let's be positive first. Whoever, I do not know the video producer there. Maybe I should ask friend of the podcast, Jessica Kleinschmidt, if she knows. I do not know who the person, the woman or man who produced it, who edited it, who mixed it, who did the research for it. I know a little bit about video production. As you know, I do the in memoriam video every year. I also worked in television for a long time. I got an Emmy nomination for my troubles. But I was really impressed by their video. They squeezed a lot into it. In fact, it was better than a lot of the montage stuff you see at the Oscars these days. And it was a fabulous intercutting of the highlights of the history of the A's and the unique fans that the A's have, which is the thing that a lot of the people who listen to this show and watch this show from Las Vegas who say nasty things to me, and that's fine, I could take it and say nasty things about A's fans, you won't understand it. It's what the fans, people who aren't at the Bay Area, who don't go to A's games, will never understand the character of the A's fan, the unique silliness of the A's fan, the passion of the A's fan, the chip on the shoulder of the A's fan. As I said, there may only be 5,000-6,000 people at a game, but there are 5,000 or 6,000 people going nuts for their team. There are 5,000 or 6,000 people who absolutely adore their team. Those are the people whose hearts are being ripped open, like that scene in Temple of Doom. I'm going to keep throwing as many movie references as I can out there. And they cut to Joe Rudy going like this when he crosses home plate in the 73 World Series and Stephen Vogt's walk-off hit. They'll cut to Dennis Eckersley pointing to that and Catfish Hunter striking someone out and Coco Crisp getting the walk-off hit against the Tigers. They'll cut to friend of the podcast, Sean Doolittle, doing the little this thing as he was coming in looking like Count Dracula, and then showing Rick Honeycutt jumping into Mark McGwire's arms when they beat the Red Sox in the ALCS. They'll show Reggie Jackson doing that fabulous bat flip in the 73 World Series, and the Bash Brothers doing a this, and a Ricky Henderson doing a that. They'll do all of those things. They put all those things, and then intercut the dudes with the big forearm bashes in the stands, the drum beats, the flags waving, the dude with the banjo, all these things that are going on throughout the years. Back in the Finley years, through the Billy Ball year, they had Dwayne Murphy and some of the Billy Ball years in there, Mike Norris, and they had this wonderful montage of the fans, old fans, young fans, fans in the 70s, fans in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, wherever. And it was a beautiful tribute. And I can't help but think, don't you see what you're leaving? Don't you see what you're leaving behind? How would you want to say goodbye to that? Why can't you nurture that? There's going to be 7,000 people who show up no matter what. And then there's always going to be fair weather fans. And then there's always going to be a sense of wanting to go to a cool stadium. Well, the A's don't play in the cool stadium. They play in a stadium that's dirty and it's falling apart. And they have skeptical fans and cynical fans. By the way, skepticism and cynicism are not the same thing, because they keep having their players taken away from them for generations. Technically, since you can go back to Kansas City and Philadelphia. So if you feel that you can be attached to the players and go to a good stadium, You have these crazed fans that you just made a whole video for, demonstrating that they're there. They're doing the heavy lifting for you. They're doing the banging the drums and making the signs and the vuvuzelas and all that stuff. You're leaving that to go to Sacramento and to Las Vegas, two places where you have virtually no money in the bank in terms of fan love and fan devotion. That is not a slam on the people of Sacramento, and that is not a slam on the people of Las Vegas. There are tremendous sports fans in Sacramento. There are wonderful sports fans in Las Vegas. I get it. And who knows? Maybe they'll go to Vegas, and maybe they'll be the team of Vegas. Maybe they'll be the Wayne Newtons of baseball. And I hope they do. I know they're terrific sports fans in Las Vegas. I have no issue with the people of Vegas. I'm just saying you're going to be bringing a team that is probably going to be worse than this team right now, because you're not going to be able to build anything in Sacramento. And you're going to bring them to a city that has zero money in the bank in terms of devotion to this team. And you're going to turn your back on the fans that are here, who you never really gave a chance. You took away the players and raised prices. You blame them for not showing up when you didn't put a product on the field a lot of times that was worth watching. And when you did, they all knew that you were just going to trade them away instantly. And you had a stadium that was never refurbished. And a bunch of fans did show up anyway. From that acorn, you could grow a tremendous tree, maybe even an oak. But we'll never find out. And it's not going to happen because, it's over. When we come back, I'm going to pay tribute to one of the great figures, if not the greatest, for the Oakland A's. Well, Ricky Henderson's the greatest, but this one might come in second. Hey, you know all about Prize Picks, right? You should. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, there's you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 players' stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as few as 4 correct picks. And Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the action in most states, including Texas, Georgia, and right here in California. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks. They get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. On this day in 1989, Dave Stewart won his 20th game. And the year that the A's would go on to win, we didn't know it then, their final World Series title in Oakland. It would be the third straight year that Dave Stewart won 20 games, and he would make it 4 in a row with yet another fabulous year in 1990. He finished second in the Cy Young Award vote in 1989, and that year he lost to Brett Saberhagen. Now, to be fair, Brett Saberhagen individually had the better year. Do you like traditional stats? He won more games, he led the league in wins, ERA, complete games. Do you like innings pitched? He had 12 complete games that year. Do you like more advanced stats? He led the league in ERA plus and WHIP and had the highest WAR of any pitcher in the American League. In fact, he had the highest WAR in the American League. You could have made an argument that he should have won the MVP. He finished 8th in the MVP voting behind Robin Yount, who had a great year. But, so did Ruben Sierra and so did Cal Ripken. But Dave Stewart had a fantastic year. He threw his 257 2/3 innings pitched, won those games and everything like that. And with that, though, and each year, I know a lot of A's fans have complained that he never won the Cy Young Award. He came in third in 1987 behind Roger Clemens. He came third in 88 behind Frankie Viola. He came in second to Brett Saberhagen in 89, and he came in third to Bob Welch and to Roger Clemens in 1990. I thought Clemens should have won the Cy Young Award that year, but that's neither here nor there. But the interesting thing about Dave Stewart finishing third and Bob Welch finishing as the leader of the Cy Young Award, based entirely on his 27 wins. Clemens had a lower ERA. Stewart had a lower ERA. Stewart pitched more innings. It's funny that Bob Welch was the Cy Young Award winner, and yet when they went to the playoffs and World Series that year, it wasn't even a question who the number one starter was going to be. It was Dave Stewart. Dave Stewart, who is one of the few players in the history of baseball to win a postseason MVP with two different franchises. He did so with the A's and did so with the Blue Jays. But he also was back-to-back playoff MVP. He was the World Series MVP for the Earthquake Series. And the very next year, in 1990, was the ALCS MVP. He pitched 4 games between the 89 World Series and the 89 World Series and the 90 playoffs, ALCS. He won all 4 of them, and he threw 32 innings in 4 games. I'm just saying, he was good. He was good. And that turnaround, to this day, is one of the most surreal turnarounds I've ever seen in my life. In that he was a pitcher for Los Angeles, played in the World Series team in 81, and then was traded away, ironically, for Rick Honeycutt, who would later become his teammate with the A's. He toiled in Texas, didn't pitch particularly well, wound up on Philadelphia, and Philadelphia in 1986 cut him. Just cut him. And the middle of 1986 became one of the most important times in the history of the A's. And it sounds weird to say that because the A's were 76 and 86 that year. But midway through the 86 year, 2 teams made stupid decisions. The Phillies gave up on Dave Stewart. The White Sox gave up on Tony La Russa. And Stewart was released and La Russa was fired. And in the midseason, the A's picked up La Russa and handed the ball to Dave Stewart. And Dave Stewart gave a preview of things to come. He was put in the rotation, went 9-5, made 17 starts, and pitched very well, thank you very much. And the next year, out of nowhere, became a 20-game winner, and the A's became contenders. And then went on, I'll say it, their greatest run. Yes, I know the Finley years won more World Series titles. But the A's became the model franchise, and they had the model ace. Yes, Stewart didn't win the Cy Young Award those years. You could make the case each year for a different pitcher. But he was the leader of that team. He was the player that you look at and go, hand the ball to him, and only good things were going to happen. He was the person who was the heart and soul of that team. He was the person who made sure there were no long losing streaks and held the other players accountable. He would throw 260, 275, 257, 267 innings each year, complete his games in double-digit fashion for many years, and show up big time in the big game. There were a couple of games he lost. He lost in the World Series, Game 4 against the Dodgers, Games 1 and 3 to the Reds. But the rest of the time, you could rely on him. Even when they lost to the Toronto Blue Jays in the 92 ALCS, it was Dave Stewart who extended it to a Game 6 with his complete game victory against the Jays, the team he would eventually join. And the other thing that made him amazing, other than the fact he seemed like a good man, a man who could stare you down with a terrifying stare, but when you hear him, had a gentle, kind voice, participated in every charity, was giving out turkeys every Thanksgiving, and trying to push the cameras away because he wasn't doing it for the publicity. A Clementi Award winner who was born in Oakland and went to St. Elizabeth High School in Oakland. And on this day, back in '89, he won 20 games for the third straight year, back when that meant something. It's going to be players like Dave Stewart and many of the other people who grew up in the East Bay who became part of the A's that we're all going to miss. Stewart, whose number 34 was retired alongside Raleigh Fingers' 34. Why was 34 still available, by the way? Stewart has become one of the most important figures in the history of the A's. You can point to Catfish in the Hall of Fame. You can point to Reggie. You can point to Eckersley and Ricky. But for what he meant to the team in their greatest run, it's going to be difficult to describe to people who weren't there, like I was in high school, what Stewart meant to this team. But on this day, in the last year they won it all, Stewart cemented his name as the ace. Well, Yankees, A's, again later today. Hey, Fisher got what he wanted. He got to see an Aaron Judge homer. I hope you're happy. Let's salvage a game, folks. Let's salvage a game, and then starts the last series. Actually, they have an off day. Yeah, they need an off day. All right, let's not get swept. Let's see what happens. Follow us at Locked On A's on Twitter, or whatever it's called now. And on Instagram, I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Liking drone shows, but not liking the production. This has been Locked On A's for the 22nd day of September, 2024. I'm yours, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.